Hi, so I recently just dropped a AC/DC video, 1975 to 1979, the Bon Scott years. And I actually did that a few weeks ago, pre-prepared it, but literally today, Friday the 13th of November, I've just been listening to Power Up today. By the time this video goes up, probably tomorrow, I can give a full assessment of the Brian Johnson era, which I'm going to start now. So basically, just recapping, AC/DC got them at Langin, made Highway to Hell. The album made number 70 in the States, went platinum, eventually would end up selling 6 million copies, as with Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, on the back of interest in Bon Scott's death. It refines the sound, takes him up a notch. Obviously, Bon Scott tragedy dies. What do? They get Brian Johnson in, and they make the second biggest selling album in Western history after Michael Jackson's Thriller. So this album, Back in Black, has sold 50 million copies. Obviously, when you see this properly, it's kind of got it embossed, the Back in Black. When I was a kid, I just never understood the title, and of course, they're in mourning, they're dressed in black. Mourning for Bon. So Bon Scott doesn't sing on this album, but his presence is very much felt. The argument is, did he write some lyrics for this album? And I think there's an argument with some of the lyrics. They kind of feel more like potentially Bon lyrics rather than Brian. I told her to come, but she told me to come, but I was already there, being a top double entendre, Bon style, from You Shook Me All Night Long. So we'll never know the truth of this. Basically, upon this album coming out, Bon Scott's estate was paid reparations for obviously his time in DC and including this album, I believe. You need to read a couple of books. There's Bon, The Last Highway, and Mick Wall's biography. It's by a guy called Jess Fink, Bon, The Last Highway, apologies. And there's also The Young Brothers by Jess Fink and Mick Wall's biography, AC/DC. These are all really good. But AC/DC are a closed shop. It's a tight business of Angus, the late Malcolm Young, and George Young in many ways, and the management. So, what's this album like? Let's talk about the production first. If you are lucky enough to go into a sound check before a gig, you will hear one track playing through the PA, or two tracks. The other track you might hear for sort of softer music is often off an album by Donald Fagen, off I think it's called The Night something anyway. Anyway, it's a Donald Fagen solo album, obviously Donald Fagen from Steely Dan. It's so brilliantly recorded that sound guys use it to kind of set and finalise the sound coming out of a PA. The other album they always use is Back in Black. Every rock gig I've played where I've been, there at the sound checks and been playing, the person has usually finalised the sound and checked it by playing Back in Black, the actual title track. And sometimes you'll hear them running through the PA even before the band comes on, maybe in the, if you go in the venue at 7 o'clock, you might hear them cranking it. And it's the reason for it is the album is so well mixed, it's so well recorded, that it is the sonic gold standard of rock albums. And I don't think many people disagree with that. Every sound on this album is perfect as it should be. It's totally natural sounding. Mutt Lange's been really savvy with the mix. He's used, really subtle delays and reverbs and just brought the right amount of ambience. I believe they went to Compass Point Studios in Nassau to record this. Other top albums recorded there would be Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden, and I think there's a Judas Priest one. I think it's Turbo, actually. Although some people would debate the merits of that, but I enjoy it. So what are the tracks like on this? I mean, the first thing is just to say Brian Johnson does an amazing job on this. It's an amazing story, the Brian Johnson story. He's basically been in, a third level band, Geordie. They've split up. He's back singing the clubs. He's got his car roofing business over in Dunstan, over in Gateshead, where he's from, where he makes final roofs of cars because he's mad into cars. He's a name that flags up because Bon Scott mentioned him back in the day. As a potential singer, he goes down to the audition. He's playing pool with the road crew. Nice, relaxed, regular guy. He goes down, and even though he doesn't really sing in the same register as DC, he finds a way to kind of screech up there, and he gets the gig. Still remember this album came out. We bought it on cassette, and we're actually on holiday in Devon. Me, my family, my brothers, we went to Virgin in Plymouth and we bought it on cassette. So opens, basically, it's got two of the great all-time rock songs opening at Hell's Bells and Shoot to Thrill. I think the first thing you notice with Hell's Bells is just the way it builds. And everything's so right. They've got the tuning on the guitars just right. There's none of those tuning problems we've had in the past that Mutt Lange's refined on Highway to Hell. Basically, extra detail, attention to detail. The bass, the drums, the bass drum sound kicking in, that sort of punch that they've caught with Phil Rudd sounds, but that's slightly kind of hollow element to it as well, just spot on. Amazing song. Brian comes in, announces himself 58 seconds in. Brian comes in singing, and he stakes his claim. There's no problem. He's not Bon Scott, he's Brian Johnson, and he asserts himself on this record. Then you've got Shoot to Thrill, another all-time classic. Then you got What Do You Do for Money Honey, which is a deep cut, not as well known, really great track, I love it. Then Giving the Dog a Bone, always used to love this as a kid, maybe don't like it quite as much now. And then a track I didn't used to like as much, which I really love, which finished side one, is Let Me Put My Love Into You, which is, this is the kind of closest thing AC/DC get to a ballad. And it also begins with quite a minor tonality on the chords. Ba, 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 ba. Then hits the A chord and brings out more of a Dorian tonality. But the musicians will know what I'm talking about. So that's an unusual track, and it's got a great da-da-down bow accent on it, which DC do so well. Side 2 open with Back in Black, one of the all-time classic rock songs. I think what's great about this track is the reason why it was so popular with rap was the tempo. The tempo's just right. It's got a groove, a tempo, a feel, and that's just perfect for someone kind of blowing over the top with rap and stuff like that. Then You Shook Me All Night Long, probably a song we never need to hear again, but it is a great pop influenced commercial rock song. It's really well crafted, beautiful solo by Angus. I suggest Angus's solos on this album. Again, he's building on the influence of Mutt Lange from Highway to Hell, and his solos are even better crafted on this. He's lost the sort of more improvised nature and are getting structured into fine-tuned little moments within the songs that move it forward. Then another all-time classic deep cut, Have a Drink on Me. Deep cut, sorry. Brilliant track, brilliant groove on this, superb riff. Then for me, the album probably tails off a bit. I've got a mate, he says I need to re-listen to this track, Shake a Leg, so I will do, but for me it's probably the weakest track. And then Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, a track I really like, but probably not as much. So, this is a classic album, but, I prefer Power Age and Highway to Hell. Like a lot of albums that explode for bands, it's kind of a bit, it's not as front-loaded as some, but its popular tracks are so popular that its status puts it right up. It's like Metallica, the Black Album, those first 5 tracks, plus Wherever I May Roam, which I think is on the other side. They're what elevated, but if you go into the deep cuts, a lot of them aren't that good. Like Struggle Within, Don't Tread on Me. This album's better than that. It didn't suffer from those problems, but I don't think it's quite as consistent as the 3 albums that went before that, includes Let There Be Rock. So it's my 4th favourite DC album of all time. But it is the best recorded, best produced hard rock album probably ever. And its status is well, richly deserved. It's an amazing moment. I mean, it kept selling bass. It was very big at the time, but it just kept selling and selling and selling. I think in America it's sold 25 million copies now. And DC are truly global acts. They're just big everywhere. Particularly seeing South America, Europe, Australia, the whole 4 hemispheres. How many hemispheres there are? I think there's 4. Yes, I think let's talk about Brian's contribution on this. I think the key thing is, and there's an argument here, did DC get bigger because Brian has a more radio-friendly voice? There's an argument with Bon Scott, and I'll tell you a little story. I was once on holiday in Croatia, so I went to a bar in Dubrovnik. I was sat in the bar, Shot Down in Flames came on. I was like, oh, this is mint. And my wife's more of a Brian fan, and she was like, oh, is this Bon Scott? And she goes, oh, I can't tell what he's singing. I was like, all right, it was interesting, I never thought of it before. Then the next track that come on, they played back to back, they played Hard as a Rock off Ball Breaker, not one of the greatest tracks, but... And then when I was listening to that, I was listening to Brian singing, and even though he's got that high kind of screech, there is more clarity on his diction, and that's very important on radio. If you're driving around in your car back in 1980 and a song comes on the radio, you're going to be drawn into the vocals and the words. And there was, reading the biographies I've read, there was some issues at the record company with Bon's style of singing. Was it radio friendly enough? I think the guy's an all-time great singer, an all-time great rock frontman, but I think it shows, like, not an argument, but it shows like how, Brian, he's not like, oh, this is the next best thing we can get. He did bring his own thing to the party and did contribute something vital to the band. So that's my take on Back in Black. So that is the last classic AC/DC album. Basically you've had this upward curve, this massive album. After this, the albums will vary. So the next album is this, For Those About to Rock. Again, produced by Mutt Lange. This was a straw that broke the camel's back with their relationship with Mutt Lange. Basically, they ended up recording in France in some warehouse. He spent ages, about 3 weeks, trying to get a drum sound. DC liked to work fast. And Malcolm, in particular, got kind of exacerbated with the working process. And they were glad to sort of, move on elsewhere after it. What's this album like? Obviously, it opens with a classic track, For Those About to Rock. Brilliant track. Their live show still finishes with it. Then I Put the Finger on You and Let's Get Up, 2 really strong tracks. Then 2 weaker tracks of Me, Inject the Venom and Snowballed. That ended side 1 on the original vinyl, and side 2, Evil Walks, COD, Breaking the Rules. Those tracks are really good. Night of the Long Knives, not into that. And then it finishes with Spellbound, which has got a really atmospheric track with a great groove to it. I think people are like, this album's not a classic, but then again, when you've come off like a run like they had, basically producing those 4 classic albums from Let There Be Rock, and if you want Blood, an amazing live album, this is a decent record. I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's still some 4 million copies. It wasn't as big as Back in Black, but it wasn't going to be. It's a cool picture in the middle eight, and just see sort of Brian putting his arms up. But a solid follow-up. Okay, at this point, so DC part with Mutt Lange, and they make probably their most sort of forgotten about album at the time, and that's 1983's Flick of the Switch. So the production on this, I'm just looking, is produced by the band. Basically, they wanted to get back to basics. I never heard this album at the time. My brother had it. Interestingly enough, this is one of the lowest charting. I think it made number 15 in the UK, maybe the same in the USA. It only sold 1 million copies. Prior to this, they've had, platinum albums eventually, and then they sold a lot more, the back catalogue, but this never did. I think the weird thing with this album, it's kind of almost all deep cuts. There's no kind of standout hit off this. The most well-known track on it is Guns for Hire, which is one of the best tracks. It's really good. So it does have a more stripped-down sound. It's kind of, going back more to the Power Age, Let It Be Rock kind of sound. And it is a good record. You got Rising Power, This House Is on Fire. This House on Fire is not as good. Flick of the Switch, Nervous Shakedown, they're really good. Landslide, Guns for Hire. Yeah, side 1 and then starting side 2 is good. Deep in the Hole, I'm not fussed with that. Bedlam in Belgium's good fun. Badlands, that's got a fairly ordinary kind of open G and D type of riff that is beloved of a lot of bands. And then it finishes with Brain Shake. I give it a 6 out of 10. I think I maybe liked it a bit more, but listening recently, I don't think it's as good as For Those About to Rock, but it is an attempt for them to kind of, get back to basics, as a lot of bands do. And like I said, it's worth checking out. And it is probably, a better album than it was initially thought of. Okay, so the next ones I don't have copies of. Got a few notes here. So we've got Fly on the Wall. I think this album always got really slagged. I always hated the production. Whenever I heard a track, I thought, what the hell is this? But I think this is the closest they get to a hair metal album. In terms of lyrical content, you've got tracks like, Sink the Pink and Playing with Girls. The other thing at this time is Angus grows his hair longer, and they have a big MTV kind of 5 video concept thing where they're playing in a kind of bar. The annoying thing on the videos is always flying around, this cartoon fly, so you try to listen to the track and then a fly will come buzzing in over the soundtrack. So it's quite interesting that it's produced by the band, but what lets you down is the mix. Brian's vocals are very screechy. They're starting to get quite screechy here, and he's sunk down in the mix. But when I listen back to it, it's got people who love it, and I can see why they like it. It's weird, it kind of predates the Cinderella sound. If you listen to the AC/DC type of tracks by Cinderella and how screechy Tom Kiefer's voice is, And an album like Night Songs and Try to Shake Me, that's what the Fly on the Wall sounds like, really. And there's a lot of bands at that time starting to kind of adopt the DC sound. I suppose a band like Kicks. I'm trying to think of some other examples, like on Britney Fox, they're sort of more of a Cinderella copy band. So it's just quite interesting where this kind of places. It's kind of in that thing where the hair thing's getting bigger. And it's wrong to say it's a hair metal album, but it's kind of the one that kind of flirts most with that. The tracks, Fly on the Walls, Good Shakes House Foundations, First Blood, Danger. I made a few notes. Yeah, Back in Business, Seventh Man. I kind of marked it a 5 out of 10. I think it's a better album than I thought it was. A remix, better sort of sound would elevate it a bit, but not a great album. And what you'll find from here on in, all the DC albums I'm going to do are kind of 5, 4, 6 out of 10. So your next one is Blow Up Your Video. I'm just putting that up on the computer here. Again, I actually saw them on this tour. I went to see the NEC because Dokken was supporting. Dokken, I loved him, but it wasn't a great show. They were lost, really. Don Dokken wasn't the kind of frontman who could, really take an arena on. But had an amazing opening. It was just after the Who Made Who, 2 years after that. Basically, a load of roadies came out dressed as Angus. Had a Who Made Who intro. There was probably about 5 roadies aside. Then behind the drum kit was a central tube. And then it filled with green smoke and Angus appeared. It was brilliant because I hadn't gone to see them. I'd gone to see, like I said, Dokken. I was like, I suppose I'll watch AC/DC because I'd kind of gone off them, I suppose, at this time. But when I watched the gig, I was like, Jesus Christ. One thing I remember was the treble on Angus's guitar. I think I had a brief toilet break. But he did a solo spot and it was like, whoa, really pierced my ears. But it showed you what a fantastic live band they are. And they were out on an average album. So yeah, people like Heatseek and That's Where I Want to Rock and Roll, the 2 singles, they're pretty good fun. Mean Street Go Zone, they're okay. Kissing Dynamite's not a great end track. They've got they got Simon Wright in on drums, the previous album, and on this. Obviously the feel's changed because Phil Rudd's such a simple drummer, but exceptionally brilliant at that simplicity, like Charlie Watts. I've explained before in the previous video the Phil Rudd groove. Then Nick of Time's not great. There's a track called Rough Stuff's pretty lame, but track 9's very interesting. It's a track called Two's Up. Again, very minor. Like Touch Too Much and Let Me Put My Love Into You. DC exploring darker tonality. And Angus does a 2-handed tap solo in it. I think it's 2-handed tapping. I don't think it's open string pull-offs. Again, sort of flirting with what's going on with guitar more. So, is it better than Fly on the Wall? I don't know. I think maybe Fly on the Wall's a bit better than this, but this Two's Up's really worth checking out. This is an album I know really well, so I'm kind of going off just recent listen. But if you're not fussed about checking it out, listen to the track Two's Up. Really unique AC/DC track. So the next album, I should just say that Blow Up Your Video went platinum. So that, for DC, most bands in Celtic go platinum. But DC, they're on the downward curve. They've had 3 platinum albums on the trot, not double, not triple, quadruple platinum. So they get Bruce Fairbairn in, he of Aerosmith fame, and they do the Razor's Edge album. And this goes on to sell 5 million records, and obviously it's got the track Thunderstruck on it, which has become an anthem. I actually don't like this record. This is my least favourite of this whole era. When I was listening to it again, I was quite surprised by Fairbairn's production. It was more kind of stripped back than I thought. I was expecting it to have bombast. They get Chris Slade in on drums, and that further degrades the groove for me. Chris Slade's a good drummer. If I was looking for a comparison of the AC/DC drummer change with Simon Wright, or certainly Chris Slade, would be when Steven Adler left Guns N' Roses and they got Matt Sorum in. Yeah, it's great in a stadium, just like straight 4 on the floor, but Steven Adler swings and grooves. He's got a great feel, and so does Phil Rudd. Just looking at this, got a few notes here, but the production's cleaner. The title track's quite unusual. Razor's Edge. It's kind of got a Middle Eastern vibe to it. But there's a track actually. It's about Donald Trump, Mistress for Christmas, but it's not great. Rock Your Heart Out, Money Talks. Not really into that. Are You Ready? that's pretty catchy, but I'm not massive on it. Then there's the very last track, Good Riddance to Goodbye and Good Riddance to Bad Luck, not into that. Yeah, this isn't an album 4 out of 10 for me. Like I said, big selling album, sort of got them back up the food chain a bit, but doesn't rock me. Next album is Ball Breaker. So obviously they've had more polished productions. I should just mention as well, they're kind of using more modern Marshall sound from Fly on the Wall. Fly on the Wall, there's definitely an increase in the gain on the guitars on Fly on the Wall. That carries on Blow Up Your Video, but probably pulls back a bit on Razor's Edge with the sort of surprise of the Fairbairn production. So they team up with Rick Rubin for 1995's Ball Breaker. Actually, they had a lot of problems with him. Apparently, he was producing another album. He does this, Rick Rubin. He just showed up occasionally. I think the bloke annoys me, to be honest. People treat him like some kind of guru. And if he's worked with Slayer, it's great. But I do think this is a good sounding album. The distortion's stripped back down, but it's got a lot of punch. And they've got Mike Fraser in engineering. I think they actually did quite a lot of work with him, really. So Mike Fraser is someone who will reappear on their other stuff. Just a quick look at the notes, but just going into the tracks, I kind of know which one better. Hard as a Rock's a good track. I'm not bothered about Cover of You and all. The Fury's pretty good. Boogeyman, it's a good track. Burning Alive, Hail Caesar. And probably my favourite track, the last track, Ball Break, is really punchy. I'd probably give this a 6 out of 10. I think this album was a move back. It was kind of after sort of navigating the 90s, it was like, right, we're going to get a stripped back classic sound. And that basically continues on to Stiff Upper Lip. I was quite surprised when I listened to this again. Again, the distortions probably pulled back even more from Ball Breaker, but there's a real commitment to pure sounds. And they were supposed to do this with Bruce Fairbairn, but he died in 1999, so they got George Young back in. But I think Mike Fraser is back on engineering on it. So again, I got Mike Fraser back in on engineering and mixing, and tracks like Meltdown, Satellite Blues, Give It Up, All Screwed Up. They've got like a really down and dirty vibe, but there's a lot of punch to the playing. You can really, the interplay on Angus and Malcolm's guitars is very apparent on this. There's a lot of left and right panning as usual on the guitars, but the interplay on the guitars, they are playing more different parts here, and you can really hear the conversation between them. Obviously Phil Rudd, I should mention, obviously came back from Ball Breaker, getting the groove back, which is why the improvements there. But on this album again, they've just got a really pure sound to his drums. So I like the sound of this album more, even more than Ball Breaker. I'd probably give this a 5, 5 or 6. The problem with these albums is they've got really good tracks, they just don't have quite enough for me. So that album went, I think it was this album went platinum, Ball Breaker went double platinum. So what happens is Stacey DC, they're supposed to probably put out an album in about 2005-06, but Cliff Williams has some kind of accident, a bit of health issues, so it gets postponed, and then basically they drop back straight in just at the right time in 2008. So for those of you who are familiar, basically in the 90s, there's just a deterioration in traditional hard rock and metal, starting sort of 92, 93, but the seeds were sown before that, really. By the end of the decade, a lot of bands have experimented with different sounds, trying to keep current, and then they basically decide, look, we're going to start sounding like ourselves. And then I think the Darkness becoming popular and Iron Maiden coming back was a big sort of upswing in the fortunes, and Metallica releasing a better album in 2008. So when DC come back, they're primed and ready for it, and this album sells 8 million worldwide, and that's Black Ice. Not the best cover here. Just one sec. I'm just gonna get the titles because I can't actually read the titles. It's so dark. So this album, got us time. Owns a Rock and Roll Train, bit of an all-time classic. Probably the best AC/DC track in years. Absolutely brilliant. Production on this was Brendan O'Brien, Mike Fraser engineering. The guitars are more stripped back. Wouldn't be criticisms. I think the production's a little light on this, but Rock and Roll Train, Skies on Fire's okay. Big Jack's good fun. Anything Goes, that was a single. That's a kind of jolly, slightly sort of Celtic sort of riff. something they'll revisit. I do like a track. War Machine's okay. Smash and Grab, not into that. Spoiling for a Fight and Wheels, they're good. Then Decibel's a really, really good track. Really like that. Stormy Mayday, like that one. She Likes Rock and Roll, not into that. Money Made's a good one. And then Rock and Roll Dream, again, slightly almost ballady, quite soft. Probably one of my favourite tracks. Rockin' All the Way, that's Throwaway. And then it finishes with the title track, Black Ice. I think this album would be better if they hadn't done 15 tracks. I think they were away for a long time and it's like, oh, we should release 15 tracks. I think if they cut 3 or certainly 4 tracks, I think it would be a better overall listen. But when it's good, it is good. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I think, let's say if you cut some tracks, it could have gone 7 or 8 out of 10. It's easily their best album since For Those About to Rock, I think. And it was seen as like a really strong comeback. So after this, I actually saw him live on this tour and I felt very lucky to see Malcolm Young for the last time. He develops dementia and he can't take part in this album, which is Rock or Bust, although he co-writes. That's a kind of funny holographic sleeve. So what's different on this album? Brendan O'Brien's still producing, Mike Fraser's still engineering. There's a great picture and I'll show you that. It's just got Angus and Malcolm's guitars. Love that. One thing I prefer with this is the production. I think it's got slightly more gain on the guitars. The drums are a little bigger. It's got more punch. But I think you can see there's just... I don't even know if this has been a happy recording because of Malcolm's problems. What's happened there. Obviously later on Phil Rudd wouldn't go on tour. It's weird when you watch the video from the song Rock or Bust, there's a Phil Rudd lookalike on the drums because he's already had this drug accusation that and somebody he's threatened to kill someone. But I do like the first three. I do like Rock or Bust and Play Ball's really catchy. Rock the Blues Away's good. Actually the first 3 tracks, these albums start strong and then you got Misadventure, Dogs Awards, got some Rock and Roll Thunder. Not bothered with those. Then Hard Times is good. Baptism by Fire, Rock the House, not into them. And then Sweet Candy's really good. Emission Control, it's pretty canny. So you're probably sort of 4, 5. I think it's a kind of 5 out of 10, maybe a 4 this album. I do think it's their weakest for a while. It's not as it's their weakest since The Razor's Edge for me. But obviously when they went on tour, they got Chris Slade in. Brian had his hearing issues, and then I get Axl Rose in to finish the gigs. And I think it wasn't a happy camp. But due respect, Angus has kept it going. I know people are critical, but at the moment they've just released Power Up. You got Phil Rudd on drums. You got Cliff Williams on bass. Phil Rudd's been there off and on 45 years. Cliff Williams since 78. Brian is back. He's been there since 1980. And then you got Malcolm's nephew, Stevie, on guitar, and Angus. I don't think you can ask for more than that. So what's the new album like? There's loads of reviews out there. So the general opinion is usually people are giving it 4 stars. You always get this, it's their best album since For Those About to Rock. This is what generally happens with DC albums. I do think Black Ice is the best album since For Those About to Rock. What's this new album like? My initial listens, I've had 4 listens. Production's kind of a mix between the Black Ice and the Rock or Bust sound. Sorry. I think Brian, considering the problems he had, he sounded really good for a 73-year-old man. I'm guessing he's recorded these vocals when he's 71. He's not singing as well as he used to, but it is good. It's got good sound. The first 3 tracks, as usual. Realise, Rejection, Shot in the Dark are really, really good. Through the Mists of Time's Growing on Me. Kick You When You're Down's alright. On the actual vinyl, side 1 finishes with Witch's Spell, which I don't think is that great. Up-tempo track, Demon Fire. This is good. Then the album's weakest track, Wild Reputation. It lasts 2 minutes 54. They could have just left that off. And Witch's Spell, probably. And just had... I should say this album's only 41 minutes. And every track is over 3 minutes, but not over 4, apart from one, and one is under 3 minutes. And very, like Rock or Bust, which is the shortest album they ever did, very short. Then No Man's Land's pretty good. And then one of my favourite tracks, the sort of second part of the album, Systems Down, is the one of the best, if not the best track for me. Then Money Shot's decent, and then it finishes with Code Red, and kind of finishes on a bit of a lull. 1, 2, 3. There's four crackers. 4 crackers, 1, 2, 3, 4 canny tracks. I'm kind of feeling that 5, 6 out of 10 thing. I think if I listened to it more, Mike Creek was 6. So I don't think it's as good as Black Ice, but it's better than Rock or Bust, and it's probably somewhere in the Ball Breaker, Stiff Upper Lip. But I haven't lived with it much. But I just think it's great that DC have put an album out. It's cheered me up. As soon as Shot in the Dark got released, I was like, it's great to have DC back. It's great to have Brian back. The legendary band, 17 albums in. They've got no business making some of the great tracks that still are, in huge respect to them. And I hope you enjoyed this anyway. That's taken 30 minutes as usual, but there's quite a lot of albums to get through. See you soon. Cheers, thanks.